There is something that happens every single morning in millions of bathrooms around the world, and most people have learned to ignore it. You pick up your toothbrush, you go through the routine, and then you rinse and spit, and you see it. A faint pink color in the sink, a trace of blood mixed with the foam, and for a split second you notice it, and then you move on, because you have things to do, places to be, and honestly, this has been happening for so long that it almost feels normal. Almost like it's just part of brushing your teeth. Just one of those things. But here's the truth that most people never get told clearly. Bleeding gums are not normal. They are not a minor inconvenience. They are not something your body just does sometimes. Bleeding gums are a signal, a quiet but persistent message that something underneath the surface is not right. And the reason so many people keep seeing that pink in the sink, day after day, month after month, year after year, is not because they are careless or forgetful. It is because the real reasons why gums become weak, inflamed, and prone to bleeding are rarely explained in a way that actually makes sense. Think about how long you have been dealing with this. Maybe it started gradually, so gradually you didn't even notice when it crossed the line from occasional to regular. You started brushing more carefully. Maybe you switched toothpastes, got one that said it was designed for sensitive gums, or for complete protection, or for total oral health. Maybe you started flossing more consistently, or tried a different technique, or invested in a better toothbrush. And things might have improved slightly for a while before going back to the same pattern. The bleeding comes back. The sensitivity returns. The gums look puffy, or they feel tender to the touch, and you find yourself almost afraid to brush too hard because you know what you're going to see. That cycle of trying and not quite solving, that is frustrating in a way that is hard to put into words, because it is not like you stopped caring. You kept trying. You followed the basic advice. And yet here you are, still seeing that blood in the sink, still feeling like your gums are fragile in a way they should not be. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question starts to grow. Not just why this keeps happening, but where it leads if it keeps going. Because here is what makes bleeding gums worth paying serious attention to. It is not the bleeding itself that should concern you most. The bleeding is a symptom. What it points to is a process, a gradual weakening of the tissue and the structural support around your teeth. And that process does not stay still. It does not just hold at mildly annoying bleeding when I brush. Left without the right attention, it progresses. The gum tissue begins to pull away from the teeth. The bone structure underneath starts to lose density and integrity over time. Teeth that once felt solid begin to feel slightly loose. Sensitivity to temperature increases. And eventually, not as some distant worst-case scenario, but as a real and documented outcome for millions of people, teeth are lost. Not because of a single dramatic event, but because of a slow process that started with a little blood in the sink that felt too small to worry about. So why does this keep happening? Even when you are brushing, even when you are flossing, even when you are doing everything the basic advice tells you to do? The answer is not what most people expect, and this is the part that is rarely explained clearly. Most of the conversation around gum health focuses entirely on what is happening at the surface. Plaque buildup, bacteria on the gum line, mechanical cleaning habits. And yes, all of that matters. But it is only part of the picture, because your gums are living tissue. They are sustained not just by good cleaning habits, but by the internal conditions your body maintains, the nutritional environment your cells operate in, the inflammatory pathways that are either being balanced or constantly triggered, and a range of other factors that your toothbrush simply cannot reach. There are common daily habits that most people never connect to gum health, things that are widely considered normal or even healthy in other contexts, that can silently drive chronic inflammation in gum tissue. There are specific nutritional gaps that are extremely common in modern diets. So common they have become invisible that directly affect how well your gum tissue can maintain itself, repair itself, and resist the kind of bacterial pressure it faces every single day. There are ways that people breathe, ways that people sleep, ways that people eat, ways that people manage stress, that all feed directly into whether your gums have the internal resources they need to stay strong, or whether they are slowly being depleted without you ever knowing it. And the reason this connection is so rarely made is that gum health has been almost entirely medicalized and localized, treated as a problem that belongs only in the dentist's chair, addressed only with external tools, measured only in terms of how well you're cleaning the surface. The idea that your gums could be weak partly because of what is happening inside your body, because of what you eat, what you absorb, how your immune system is calibrated, how your body handles inflammation, is not something most people hear explained in a practical, actionable way. So they keep trying the surface solutions, and the underlying factors keep doing what they do. Now, if you are watching this and thinking, yes, that sounds exactly like what I have been going through, I want to make sure you know about something that might genuinely help. In the first link in the description and in the pinned comment, there's a guide specifically for people who are tired of seeing their gums bleed even after brushing every single day. It lays out a clear path for strengthening gum tissue naturally and safely. not through expensive procedures or complicated regimes, but through an understanding of the real factors involved and practical steps that work with your body's own processes. If this is something you have been struggling with, that first link is worth a look. Now let us talk about what actually changes when you start to understand what is really going on. Because there is something that happens in the mind when a problem that felt random and stubborn suddenly starts to make sense. When the pieces come together and you realize this was never truly mysterious, it was just explained poorly. There is a shift from helplessness to orientation, from trying things randomly and hoping for the best to understanding what your gums actually need and being able to provide it deliberately. And what your gums actually need turns out to be something that is both simpler and more fundamental than most people realize. Your gum tissue is constantly being challenged. The bacterial environment in your mouth is active around the clock. Your immune system is making constant decisions about how aggressively to respond to that environment. The blood vessels that supply nutrients to your gum tissue are either functioning well or being compromised by factors in your diet and lifestyle. The collagen structure that gives your gums their resilience and firmness is either being maintained or gradually degrading. All of these processes are happening whether you're thinking about them or not, and they are all influenced by inputs that you actually have control over, once you know what those inputs are. The gum tissue is not just a passive surface. It is dynamic. It responds to what it receives. It has a remarkable capacity to recover when the conditions shift in its favor. People who have dealt with chronic gum sensitivity and bleeding for years have seen those symptoms reverse, not because they found a miracle product, but because they addressed the underlying environment that was keeping their gums in a weakened state. That is not a fantasy. It is what happens when the real factors get addressed instead of the surface ones. This is important to hold on to because one of the most discouraging things about dealing with persistent gum problems is the feeling that you are stuck, that you have tried what is available, that this is just how your gums are, that this is some fixed feature of your biology that you have to manage rather than resolve. That feeling is understandable, but it is not accurate. Your gums are not fixed. They are tissue that responds to its environment. And when that environment changes in the right ways, the tissue changes with it, which brings us to something worth being direct about. You do not need to spend a fortune to start moving in the right direction. Some of the most impactful changes you can make for your gum health cost very little or nothing at all. They require understanding, not expensive intervention. They require adjusting inputs your body is already working with every single day, not adding complicated new products or undergoing costly procedures. The barrier for most people is not money. It is not access. It is simply not having had the right information presented in a clear and practical way. And this is where accessible, reliable guidance becomes genuinely valuable. Not generic advice that just tells you to brush and floss and see your dentist. You already know that, and it has not been enough. But specific, grounded information about the factors that drive gum weakness and how to address them in ways that are realistic for everyday life. For anyone watching this who has been dealing with weak or bleeding gums and is worried about where it leads, the sensitivity, the looseness, the possibility of losing teeth, the method in the first link in the description and in the pinned comment is designed exactly for that. It is accessible. It is grounded in real understanding of how gum tissue works, and it offers a practical path forward for people who are done trying the same surface solutions and getting the same disappointing results. Here is what becomes possible when you have that clarity. You stop seeing the problem as something happening to you that you can only respond to. You start seeing it as something you can genuinely influence, because you understand the levers. You know what your gum tissue needs to regenerate and stay strong. You know which daily habits have been working against you without you realizing it. You know which nutritional factors have been missing and how to restore them. And you have a path that does not depend on guesswork, on trying product after product, on waiting until things get bad enough to require expensive intervention. That shift from confusion and frustration to clarity and direction is not a small thing. For anyone who has spent years dealing with this problem, feeling like their efforts were never quite enough, it represents something genuinely meaningful. The confidence of knowing that the cycle can actually be broken, that the bleeding does not have to be a permanent feature of your mornings, that your gums can become strong and resilient again, not through wishful thinking, but through understanding what they actually need. There is real science behind how gum tissue recovers. There are documented processes through which even significantly compromised gum tissue can rebuild integrity, reduce inflammation, and return to a healthy state. This is not hopeful speculation, it is observable biology. The gums, like all living tissue in the body, are constantly in a process of maintenance and renewal. When the conditions that have been working against that process are removed and the conditions that support it are put in their place, the tissue responds. That response may not happen overnight, but it happens. And it happens consistently when the right factors are addressed in the right way. What this means practically is that the first step is not a product purchase or procedure. The first step is understanding what has actually been driving the weakness, understanding what your gums have been missing, Understanding which of your daily habits have been contributing to the problem and which changes will actually make a difference. Because when you have that understanding, everything that follows becomes purposeful. Every choice you make around food, around your daily routine, around how you care for your mouth, carries a logic that is grounded in how your body actually works. And that logic is what makes the results sustainable, not just temporary improvement that fades when you go back to your old patterns, but a genuine and lasting shift in the health of your gum tissue. Understanding the cause is always the foundation. Before any solution can work, truly work, not just mask the symptom, there has to be an accurate picture of what is actually going on. And building that picture is exactly what this conversation has been about. The blood in the sink is not random. The sensitivity is not inevitable. The weakness is not permanent. These are signals from tissue that is responding to its environment, and that environment can be changed. The path forward is real, it is accessible, and it starts with the decision to look at this problem differently. Not as something you manage, but as something you understand. And once you understand it, everything changes.